Hello again everyone, this is Paul, and this is my third video in one day where I'm in the gorgeous Henry Ford Woods. I just can't get enough of this place. It's like every 2 seconds I say, let's do a video. So this time I'm going to do a video to sort of honor the person that's filming me. She really loves the Donkey Kong Country series, which I've never beaten any of them, but I have beaten the first time Donkey Kong attempted to go into 3D, like true 3D, not the pre-rendered 3D that the Donkey Kong Country games were talking about. I'm talking like this, true 3D, where everything's around you. So Donkey Kong 64 was the very first Nintendo 64 game to use the expansion pack, which allowed it to basically use graphical effects and have basically more than a Nintendo 64 cartridge was capable of. So in other words, the lighting was more realistic, there was more voice acting, everything was bigger and better. But did that necessarily make the game better? I would argue yes and no, because this game came out exactly a year after Banjo-Kazooie was released for the Nintendo 64, and the comparisons are dead on. You could basically look at anything in this game and say, they got that from Banjo-Kazooie. They even had the same composer do the music, which is not a bad thing at all, because the music is superb, and the sound effects are quite possibly even better. The first level takes place in a jungle, though admittedly it's not as photorealistic as this one. So Donkey Kong 64 is a pretty substandard platformer that basically acts like most of the other collectathons in the Nintendo 64 era. Everything is just grab a bunch of items, get to the boss, get another item, and move on to the next level. There are 9 worlds, not quite as varied as Banjo-Kazooie, but still interesting enough to explore. But the boring part of the game comes in when you unlock the rest of the Donkey Kong family, because you start out only controlling Donkey Kong, as should be expected, his name is on the game. Gradually you get Diddy, Lanky, Tiny, and Chunky. A lot of E's in his family. But the thing is, the game feels so segregated that it almost defeats such a brilliant concept. Because the game does a great job of showcasing each of the Kongs' personalities. Like, they all have different animations when you're choosing them. There's a DK rap at the beginning of the game that's super catchy and really emphasizes their personality. In addition, they all have different instruments, different moves that you can use to progress through the game. The problem is what they collect. Each Kong has a specific set of bananas they can collect, even golden bananas. If they're clearly in view, they can be grayed out because you have to have these specific Kong just to grab it. There are very rare instances where the Kongs actually have to work together. And sometimes there are entire chunks of the game where you can go through as one Kong and say, oh, I've reached the end of the banana trail. There's a further banana trail. Okay, I gotta run all the way back to the DK barrel and grab those bananas. In addition, the game has some absolutely horrendous camera angles. And even when that's not the problem, there are instances where the camera locks itself into the worst position possible. Keep in mind, this is one of the earliest 3D games, so they didn't quite understand how to maneuver things in 3D space. That I can forgive. But there are other parts of the game that aren't so great. There are really, really awful mini-games that typically a lot of them are either counterintuitive, luck-based, or just plain out repeated. In addition, in order to just even get to the final boss, you're required to play 2 retro games. One of them is the original arcade Donkey Kong. The other is another really obscure game called Jetpack. Jetpack is actually kind of fun. It involves basically controlling this miniature pixelated man that has a jetpack, and you have to blast aliens with your shooter and collect spaceship parts. It's when you play the original Donkey Kong that things just get hair-raising, because you only have 1 life to do it, and I believe they put it on B mode of the original arcade version, so you die once, you have to start the whole process over again. And even after you beat it, you have to beat it again, with Mario falling in love with a coin. I mean, not only is that messed up from a moral standpoint, but I just hated playing that game so much that I can't see why they would have such an arbitrary task getting in the way of beating this game when it's already so messed up in other ways. Now, I'm making it out like I'm being really harsh, and though I totally hate this game, I really don't. When I was a kid, I had fond memories of this game, and even the most frustrating parts were redeemable because of the amazing music, the huge worlds you could explore, the really cool animations, and the final boss at the end was absolutely phenomenal. I just wish the entire game would have been more like Banjo-Kazooie, where it embraced its creative side and had it where Banjo and Kazooie were always together, as opposed to the Kongs always having to swap out instead of there being like a co-op option. There are battle modes that you can do, but they're fairly limited in what you can do, and you can clearly tell they were trying to be like GoldenEye 007, but failed miserably because the controls are so loose and the combat is easily one of the weakest parts of the game, as you can sometimes, actually, you always can never just totally spam the enemy. If you hit them first with a punch, your next punch will go right through them. So not only is the combat extremely simple, but it's glitchy on purpose. So in conclusion, if you like mascot platformers, I guess this one is meh, but I would definitely prefer Banjo-Kazooie or Banjo-Tooie over this. And if you absolutely insist on buying it, do not do so because you're a fan of Donkey Kong. Only do so if you're a fan of 3D platformers like Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie and think, I have nothing else to lose. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and until my next video, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless.